Welcome back to Fly to Freedom. And today's episode is from a listener question of can you heal without facing the trauma? And I know this question lives in the minds and bodies of so many people walking the path of recovery. So is it possible to recover and do the deep inner work without facing the trauma that caused it? Maybe you've asked yourself that very thing in the quiet moments. Maybe you've thought, I just want to get better and I don't want to dig into the past. Or maybe the word trauma feels too big or too vague or too close for comfort. This is a question that deserves honesty, but it also deserves tenderness, because behind it is often a very real fear. What if I can't face what's behind this? What if I'm not strong enough? What if it breaks me? So let's start by telling the truth about trauma. Trauma is not the thing that happened to you. It's what you felt in response and what you've carried forward through your life. It's the beliefs that took root when you didn't feel safe or seen or soothed. It's the disconnection that settled in when your nervous system had to shut down to keep you functioning. And often it's invisible from the outside. No one else saw the moment your heart decided it wasn't safe to trust. No one else noticed when you started believing that your needs were too much, that you had to be good or quiet or small. That's trauma too. You don't have to have survived a catastrophe to be carrying trauma in your body. You just had to go through something or to be deprived of something that your system couldn't fully process, especially if you felt you were alone in it. And when that's the case, the body finds a way to cope. And for many of us listening to this episode, that coping took the form of restriction, of control, of disappearing into behaviours that helped us feel safe, or at least less unsafe. So of course, when we start trying to let go of these behaviours, it stirs something deep. We're not just changing food, we're unravelling survival strategies. So is it possible to begin recovery without directly facing the trauma? The answer is yes, and also not entirely. Let me explain. There are absolutely steps you can take, vital steps that don't require you to dig into your past right away. You can begin eating regularly. You can begin resting. You can stop purging or weighing or obsessively moving your body. You can start showing your body that it's safe to stay. And these aren't small things, they are acts of profound courage. And for many people, they're the first signs that you're choosing life over survival mode. And often you need to build this foundation of nourishment, of nervous system regulation and external safety before your body can even open the door to deeper healing. Because trauma work is not about ripping off the plaster and pouring salt on the wound. It's about building the safety and strength to tend to it with care when you're ready. If you're listening to this and thinking, I know there's trauma under this, but I'm not ready to go there, I want you to hear this with your whole heart. You're not doing recovery wrong. Avoidance isn't failure, it's a survival response, and your system learned it for a reason. The question isn't, why am I not ready? It's what would help me to feel safe enough to begin. And that shift in perspective from pressure to permission is where the healing starts. Sometimes the body leads before the mind catches up. Sometimes the very act of eating when it terrifies you, or resting when everything inside you screams that you haven't earned it, sometimes this is the trauma work. Because those acts challenge the beliefs that were born in pain. The belief that you're only worthy when you're perfect. the belief that your needs are shameful, that your body is the enemy. All of those are invitations, and sometimes the body says yes to healing before the mind understands why. So yes, recovery can begin without addressing the trauma head on. But eventually, if you want to move beyond just coping, if you want to move beyond white-knuckling your way through meal plans and fear foods, the deeper work will begin to call you, gently, repeatedly, and then persistently. You might find yourself doing all the right things and still feeling stuck, still feeling like something inside you hasn't quite landed, still bracing every time you look in the mirror or every time someone tries to get close to you or every time you have a feeling that feels too deep. That's not failure. That's your body telling you that there's more here. You've built the scaffolding. Now the real rebuilding can begin. And that part, the deeper emotional healing, is not about going back and reliving everything. It's about gently turning toward the parts of you that got frozen in time. The parts that were left holding the fear, the shame, the grief, the loneliness. You don't have to relive your worst moments, but at some point you'll be invited to meet the younger version of you who lived through them. Not to re-traumatize her, but to say something she never got to hear. You didn't deserve that. It wasn't your fault. And you're not alone anymore. And when that moment comes, you'll know. Not because someone told you it was time, but because something inside you will whisper, I'm ready to stop surviving and start living. That doesn't mean it won't feel scary, because it will. But you'll be walking in with more strength than you had before. More tools, more support, and more clarity. Because trauma work isn't something you do instead of recovery. It is recovery. It's what turns your healing from surface level into soul deep. Avoidance isn't weakness, it's wisdom. Your nervous system is doing exactly what it was designed to do, to keep you safe. And if the idea of looking at your past feels terrifying, there's a reason for that. At one point in your life, you learned that feeling things, really feeling them, was too dangerous. So your system built walls. It buried things. It said, not now, survive first. And those walls might be why you're still here and why you made it through. So let's not judge those walls, let's honor them. And then gently we can start to notice when they begin to soften. Not because you force them down, but because safety grows. Safety doesn't come from telling yourself you're safe. It comes from experiencing safety in your body again and again and again. From being met and meeting yourself with compassion instead of criticism. From allowing yourself to feel seen without analyzing it. From eating the food and nothing bad happening. From crying and not falling apart. And from being held emotionally by someone you trust and realizing you're not alone anymore. That is trauma healing, and that's where it begins. You don't start by diving into your darkest memory. You start by noticing the feeling in your chest when someone says you matter, and you breathe through it. You start by noticing the part of you that wants to run when kindness comes too close, and you stay, even if it's just a little longer than you did last time. Trauma work is not dramatic, it's not an exorcism, and it's not about crying on the floor for hours, unless that's what your body needs. It's small, quiet moments of reconnection to your body, your truth, and your unmet needs. It's speaking to the part of you that had to go silent and saying, I'm listening. One of the reasons we avoid looking back at trauma is because we're scared that if we feel it, it will destroy us, we'll become a mess, and we'll fall apart and never be able to put ourselves back together again. especially if you've spent your whole life being the strong one, the reliable one, the overachiever, the caregiver, the perfectionist, the people pleaser. You might have built an entire identity around holding it all together and not needing help. I know I did. So to even consider letting go of that armor, to soften, to feel, to need, can feel like death. Not physical death, but ego death. The unraveling of who you thought you had to be in order to survive. It can feel like losing yourself. But the deeper truth is you're not losing yourself. You are finding the parts of you that had to hide underground. The tender parts, the joyful ones, the creative, emotional, sensitive, fiery, loving ones. Those parts didn't just disappear, they were exiled. Because the world, your family, or your culture didn't make space for them, so you adapted. You became who you thought you had to be. But now, in recovery, you don't have to keep pretending. You don't have to perform safety anymore, because you get to create it. And that often begins with grief. Grief for what you didn't get. Grief for the childhood you deserved, but didn't have. Grief for the years spent starving, hiding, shrinking, emotionally and physically. And that grief is not a setback. It's a doorway. And walking through it doesn't break you. It breaks the illusion that you had to be anything other than who you really are. You're not too much. You're not too broken or too emotional. You're a human. And being human means feeling, which means that healing always includes feeling. And yes, it will shake your identity, but it will also build something truer. Something that's rooted in wholeness, not performance, in presence and not perfection, and in love, not fear. Trauma healing isn't about fixing yourself, it's about reclaiming yourself. The parts of you that got lost in the noise of survival, the parts that were silenced, shamed, or shut down. And often those parts live in the form of your inner child. And I know that term can sound fluffy or abstract at first, and I really didn't understand it to begin with. But let me put it this way. Trauma disconnects us from the version of ourselves who first felt unsafe. And real healing means going back, not to relive the pain, but to meet her there and offer her the safety and love she needed but didn't have. To say, I'm here now, I see you, and I won't abandon you again. For me, this part of the journey didn't happen as soon as I began recovery. At first, I did what I had to do to survive. I did what I was told, I ate the food, I stopped moving compulsively. I cried through my meals with my family by my side. But underneath it all, there was this hollow ache. I thought, why do I still feel so empty even though I'm doing everything right? And then I began meeting the parts of me I'd buried. I remember the first time I really saw her, my younger self. She didn't speak, she didn't even look at me. She just sat there with her head down like she was too ashamed to exist. And it hit me like a wave. This is who I've been abandoning over and over. Every time I ignored my needs, every time I tried to be good and perfect and acceptable. I started talking to her, not in a scripted way, but from the heart. I said, you don't have to be good all the time to be loved. I told her I'm sorry I left you behind. And then I cried for her. Not because she was weak, but because she was so strong for so long, and because no one had ever really seen her pain. Not even me. And that's when things started to shift. Because when you stop abandoning your inner child, you stop abandoning yourself. You stop choosing silence over truth. You stop saying yes when your whole body knows you mean no. When you stop trying to earn love through shrinking, physically, emotionally, and spiritually, you actually start living in a way that honors who you really are. And one of the most heartbreaking parts of trauma work is not grieving for what just happened, but for what never did happen and needed to. The hug that didn't come, the apology that was never spoken, the parent who couldn't love you in the way that you needed, and the fantasy that maybe, just maybe, if you were perfect enough, pleased them enough, you were small enough, successful enough, it might finally come. And that grief is deep, because it's not just about letting go of the past, it's about letting go of the hope that one day it'll change, that one day they'll see you, choose you, and love you in the way you've always ached for. I felt that grief. I remember the moment I realized that the love I'd been chasing my entire life was never coming in the form I wanted it, and not from the people I wanted it from, not in the way I'd imagined. And it felt like something broke inside me. I felt this just immense grief and heartbreak rising up from inside me. Not because I was weak, but because I was finally facing my truth. And through that grief came freedom. Because when you stop chasing love in the wrong places, you can finally start giving it to yourself. And that's what self-parenting really is. It's not about pretending you had a perfect childhood or erasing what hurt you. It's about becoming the parent you needed, holding yourself when you're scared, speaking kindly to yourself when shame rises, setting boundaries where chaos once reigned. It's about finally letting yourself receive the love, the unconditional love you always needed, because now you're the one giving it. And you don't have to wait for anyone else to get it right. You get to choose love now. Not the fluffy bath bombs, mantras, and positive affirmations version, but the real kind. The kind that says, I will not abandon you ever again. No matter what you weigh, no matter how messy you feel, no matter how many mistakes you make, no matter what the voice of shame says, I'm here, I love you, and I'm not going anywhere. When you start doing this work, not just eating the food, but really meeting the parts of you you've spent the entire life avoiding, something changes. You begin to let go of the version of you that was built from trauma. The one who coped by being perfect. The one who stayed quiet to keep the peace. The one who thought her worth was in her weight, her performance, or her ability to hold everybody else together and keep them happy. That version of you was never meant to be the real you. She was the one who made it through. She kept you alive, and she played by the rules that were given to her. But now something deeper is asking to be born. I remember the terrifying moment when I realized, if I'm not the one who's always in control, always pleasing, always performing, who am I? Felt like standing on the edge of a cliff and letting go of everything I thought I was. And for a while it was incredibly disorientating. And then, little by little, I started to hear her, the real me, the one underneath the rules and roles and rigidity. She was softer, braver, funnier, wilder, more honest, and more alive. She laughed louder. She cried more easily. She danced and sang badly in the kitchen, and she let people in. She stopped apologizing for needing rest, or even for her existence, for having boundaries, for taking up space. She's me now, and I love her. Not because she's healed, but because she's whole. And that's what this work is really about. It's not about fixing yourself because you were never broken, not becoming some perfect version of you, but remembering who you were before the world told you who you needed to be. It's about coming home to the self you were always meant to be. Before trauma, before fear, before shame and silence. You might still feel unsure. You might still feel terrified of what's underneath the behaviors. And you might be wondering if you're the exception, if this kind of healing is for other people, not for you. But please hear me, sweetheart, because you are not too broken or too late or too far gone. Everything you've done to survive so far makes perfect sense. Every wall you built, every feeling you numbed, and every need you buried. You did what you had to do. And now, if you're listening to this, you're probably feeling that whisper that it's time to come home to yourself. And you don't have to do that alone. This is why I do what I do, why I became a recovery coach. Because I know what it's like to be terrified of your own feelings, to be high functioning on the outside and hollow on the inside, to be so good at surviving that healing feels impossible. But it's not, and there is another way. That's why I created the Eating Disorder Recovery Circle. It's a space where you don't have to pretend, where all parts of you are welcome, where you're not just seen as a body to fix, but as a soul to honor. And if you want more personal, more focused support, that's why I offer one-to-one coaching too. Because you don't have to walk through the fire alone. You can be met there, held there, and guided through it with love, truth, and compassion. So if something in you is stirring, or if your heart is whispering that it's time, reach out, join the circle, message me about coaching, or just keep listening. Whatever step you take, let it be one rooted in love, not pressure or punishment or performance, just love. Because no matter where you are in your journey, you're not behind and you're not broken, and you are so, so worthy of healing. Thank you for listening to the episode today. And just know I see you. Lots of love.